If you search the word testosterone on YouTube, you'll get thousands of videos telling you how you can increase your testosterone through diet alone. There are some pretty crazy claims out there, but which of those actually have evidence? Today, I'm going to walk you through the two main concepts for eating a diet that promotes a healthy level of testosterone and how to figure out which advice is misguided. Let's go. Welcome back, everybody, to the 10th episode of the 4th season of the Building Lifelong Athletes podcast. I'm your host, Jordan Rennicke. And in this podcast, our goal is to help keep you active and healthy for life through practical and actionable information. Today, we're talking all about dietary changes for increasing your testosterone, right? So let's dive into it here. There are a lot of insane claims on the internet about this. I'll just throw that out there to start. If you go on the internet and you just Google or YouTube testosterone and food and whatever, there is so much out there. I actually did this as kind of an experiment. I just typed in testosterone diet on YouTube and just was watching shorts, and my goodness, there is quite a lot of stuff out there. Some of it is solid. Other information is questionable at best. We'll put it that way, but it's super overwhelming. Obviously, I'm a physician and I study this stuff in my free time. I'm a huge nerd. I love learning about this. And for me, it's overwhelming to look at this stuff. So I can only imagine what it's like for someone who just wants to learn the information, right? Who maybe doesn't have a health or medical background and does the search and then Google and oh my gosh, what is going on? And fear not, today we're gonna talk all about it and kind of break it down a little bit, like I said. But the issue I have is there's so many people who speak with so much confidence, right? They're saying, eat this, do this, this will boost your testosterone. But how can they really know? That's my question for them is when you speak with that much confidence, how can you truly know that this will help every single person? And they can't is the answer. If you ever find someone on the internet speaking with so much confidence saying, hey, this has to be the way, this is the way, I'd be really skeptical. They either are an expert in their field and feel fantastically confident in that, or they don't really know anything. And like I said, most people, even experts in their field, tend to have a lot more humility saying, hey, it could be this, it could be that. And so like I said, when people make big claims, a lot of times they're trying to get clicks. And I understand that in this economy, that is, how you get paid and all that. But if someone's making huge claims, I would kind of question, what are their intentions? But like I said, the people who do claim these extraordinary things, right? Almost none of them will have any sort of solid evidence base. And so they're preying on your emotions, right? Because this is a very visceral reaction, right? Testosterone is a big thing. It's talked about all the time. And it's kind of lauded as this thing that's it's a miracle thing. Testosterone will fix everything. And that's not the case, as I've seen many times as a physician. But that being said, there's a lot of people who have lots of big concerns about it. And, people who are saying you need to do this and that for testosterone, they're still preying on emotions. And so that's why this one is near and dear to my heart, because there's so many things that I've seen and so many patients that I've worked with who've said, they've heard X, Y, and Z. And so like I said, I just want to kind of break it down into the two most important things that I think we really need to focus on. That's it. So first we'll talk about the concept one. This is maintaining a healthy body composition. And you might be like, whoa, that sounds kind of familiar. Well, yeah, let's take it back to the first season of the Building Lifelong Athletes podcast. We talk about the necessary 9, right? These 9 things that I harp on saying, hey, if you lock in and do these 9 things, you're going to have really good outcomes. It's one of those 80-20 principles, right? If you lock in these 9 things, so just 9 things, if you worry about those and master those, that's going to easily take care of 80+% of your health, they said. But there's a reason that I talk about this and I harp on it over and over again because it's a critical piece for your health. Some people might be like, oh, body composition doesn't seem as, cool or awesome as nutrition or exercise or sleep. Like I said, but it's all tied together. Like I said, you can't escape that. Like I said, but if there's one thing you can do for your testosterone, one single thing, it's having a normal body composition. That's the most important thing you can do to have a solid testosterone level. Everything else is kind of, here and there, arbitrary. There are things you can do, but like I said, this is one of the lowest hanging pieces of fruit. If you have an issue with your body composition, this is where we start. So there's no amount of testosterone boosting foods that will make up for poor body composition, right? If you have obesity, right? You're up there and you have a BMI, maybe 35, 40, something like that. It doesn't matter how many quote unquote superfoods you eat. It doesn't matter at all because like I said, it's not going to make a dent in that. Like I said, body composition in general, very important. So if you have obesity, eliminating that in whatever way works for you, that will have a way bigger effect on testosterone than any specific food. So once again, I leave that open saying in whatever way works for you. So I'm not saying, hey, we have to do X, Y, or Z, but like I said, at the end of the day, we have to recognize that having unhealthy body composition does have effects. And like I said, this is not as sexy as some people claim that there's a specific food, we're gonna eat this. But like I said, if you lose adipose tissue, you're going to increase testosterone. And the more you lose, the more your testosterone will increase. Obviously, this only applies if you have excess adipose tissue, right? So but we think about adipose tissue, if we go back, what does it do? Well, there's an aromatase enzyme in there. What that does, that converts testosterone to estrogen, right? And so if we have excess adiposity, that means we're going to have more estrogen and less testosterone. And so when we lose that extra fat or adipose tissue, we are going to be decreasing the activity of that enzyme and we're going to have more testosterone. Like I said, and that's what it is. But like I said, when you start getting over 10% of your body weight loss, you can start to see the real gains. So like that's super important in terms of losing excess weight. And once again, talking about excess weight, we're not talking about, hey, you're already pretty darn lean, we need to continue to lose more weight. Like we'll talk about that in a little bit here. That is not what we're talking about. We're talking about if you have excess weight and increased adiposity, that's number one. So like I said, that's first and foremost. If you maintain a healthy body composition, there we go. If you don't have a healthy body composition, that's the first place to start. That'd be like the first thing I would focus on. Like lifestyle changes, we talk about all the time. Lifestyle changes are the first line for pretty much everything we do. And it's no different here. If we have an abnormally low testosterone and we have increased adiposity, like right there, low hanging fruit, let's lose weight and improve our body composition, because that's going to have so many benefits if possible. Obviously, like you're probably looking like, yeah, Jordan, I know that. That's easy. It's easier said than done. And I get that. I understand that. But like I said, I think it's our job to understand that, talk about it, because it's important to talk about it. And like I mentioned before, if you actually get too lean, it can actually lead to the opposite. So, right, if you're like going on a big cut, specifically bodybuilders, we talk about all the time, they've tested their levels of testosterone when they're really, really lean and it's really low. So we want to be gentle and find that range, right? We kind of have a sweet spot for we want to lose weight, but obviously not too much weight. Like I said, most people, that's not their problem. But like I said, I don't want to not include that, because that is important. If you start losing a lot of weight and you're already at a normal body composition, that will lower your testosterone, not increase it. All right, the next concept is to eat a health-promoting dietary pattern. And does that sound familiar? Yeah, once again, that's one of our big components of the Necessary 9. And you might be saying, Jordan, you're kind of copping out here, man. This is like not actual information. Like, well, no, I'm telling you right now, it is actual information, because these are the most important things. Like I said, I'm trying to focus our sights, or kind of lock us in on the most important things and kind of keep you away from the flashy distractions, right? Online, it's all about getting eyeballs and clicks. I get that. And my strategy is not necessarily sexy, but I promise you, if you stay with this and stay consistent with it, you'll see huge, huge results, and way more results than you ever get chasing the biggest fad here and there. So like I said, but hang with me here. So inside of that, there's lots of different things we're going to talk about, lots of different dietary patterns that can work for this. All right, and so the first one we're going to dive into here is, does inflammation matter? So does an inflammatory response from a diet matter? Well, a pro-inflammatory response, they're kind of associated with testosterone deficiency. So like it can be inferred that if you had a high inflammatory diet, that can maybe cause low testosterone. Obviously, what is a high inflammatory diet? It's kind of questionable. There's a inflammatory diet index that they kind of use to judge, like, hey, based off of these foods, you probably have a higher inflammatory diet, and based off of markers that they see based off when people eat. So like I said, there's a lot of like, this leads to that, leads to this, leads to that, and kind of extrapolating from there. But overall, can kind of give you a general number. And there's a study that looked at people, they broke them up into tertiles, right? So bottom third, middle third, top third. And the lowest versus highest tertiles, they did have a 30% increased risk of testosterone deficiency. So, right, so when you were really high in inflammation, had a higher risk of testosterone deficiency. But overall, there was like no significant change in total testosterone, estrogen, SHBG, or free androgen index. So, and then when they compared them continuously, meaning instead of breaking up into tertiles, just kind of on a spectrum, it was only like a 4% higher increase in testosterone deficiency with the most inflammatory diet. So if you ate the most inflammatory diet, you did have a higher risk, but it didn't seem crazy. It wasn't significant. And so that being said, in this study, those with the highest inflammatory diet also had the highest BMI. So that may be a confounding nature as well. And so this was retrospective in nature. So nobody know if it was caused by the dietary changes, or like I said, having increased adiposity, we know can also be an inflammatory state. So there's lots of things going on there, and that's kind of neither here nor there. But that being said, obviously, garbage in equals garbage out. That's a saying in data science, meaning like, hey, if you put junk into data or analysis or any sort of computation or anything like that, you're going to get bad results. And the same thing here. If you're eating really poorly, I don't expect you to have good results. I think that will last for a while. Obviously, everyone knows when you're a kid, everyone just eats whatever they want. And that's not the case today anymore. But, everyone knows that that person who can eat whatever they want and nothing happens. And like I said, eventually that typically catches up to people. The reason is, like I said, if you're eating lots and lots of things that are super dense, super processed, that's just a lot of calories. And a lot of times, a lot of calories can lead to excess weight gain and all that stuff. So there's lots of stuff going on. But the same can be said, like I said, for diet and testosterone. So if you have low testosterone, hypogonadism, and unhealthy body composition, they're all kind of associated with the diet that had the highest consumption of bread, pastries, dairy products, desserts, eating out, low intake of homemade meals and vegetables, all that fun stuff. So like I said, all these studies, this study, they're specifically looking at this low testosterone, all these bad things were associated with a really not high quality diet, kind of not a health promoting diet. And that's pretty standard. And like I said, any standard dietary advice is going to like stand here saying, hey, like, yeah, don't eat all those things. Let's try to adjust there. So overall, this is just pretty standard dietary advice. So we're eating, more homemade meals, less processed food, things like that. Those seem to be tied with lower inflammation, as opposed to, like I said, when you're eating out and eating lots of processed foods, that has higher inflammation. So I'm not slam dunk sold on the inflammation diet specifically looking at testosterone here. A lot of times there's a correlation between inflammation and just overall dietary pattern. So we'll see. The next advice is to avoid a rapid decrease in calories. So we talked about eating calories, making sure we're in the right calories, talk about it all the time. But it seems that if you have a huge decrease in total calories, that plays a big role in that a rapid decrease in calories can decrease testosterone. And like I said, this also goes hand in hand with weight loss, right? So we talked about this before. If you are doing a huge cut, so going to a huge energy deficit, you can have a decrease in your testosterone. And so I know I'm harping on like normal body composition. The last thing I want you to do though is okay, all right, Jordan says I need to lose some weight. I'm just going to go ham and not eat and just go on a 7-day fast and exercise like crazy. Like that's not what I'm telling you to do. There's so many reasons why you should not do that. The least of those is necessarily decreasing calories, but obviously we don't want to do that from a calorie perspective, from a testosterone perspective, from a lean muscle perspective. We don't want to do that because you might lose more lean tissue. So lots of reasons not to do that. But that being said, those people who do that can have a decrease in testosterone. So something to be aware of. And another question we can ask is, well, what about specific macronutrient relationships, right? So the protein, carbs, and fats, what does it look like? It doesn't matter what the breakdown is. Overall, we're going to look at a couple things. There may be something to this for a couple of them, but we'll kind of break it down. Initially looked at some studies looking at low carb diet. So kind of lower carb, higher protein is what it was. So it wasn't necessarily keto in terms of where it's predominant fat and a mild or moderate protein level. But for low carb, there's a systematic review that showed an actual decrease in testosterone when consuming high protein, which I thought was interesting because everyone talks about, hey, you need lots and lots of protein, but it's maybe more fats. But like I said, that low carb with a high protein didn't seem to be necessarily better for testosterone. Looking at plant-based diets, in a meta-analysis that I saw, there didn't seem to be a big significant change in testosterone levels with those on a plant-based diet. So that might seem counterintuitive to some people because they say, oh, like you can't have testosterone with a low plant-based diet or a low fat diet. And it depends on, it was very variable in terms of the fat consumption, and we'll talk about that in a second. But it seems like you can have a plant-based diet and have normal testosterone levels. That can indeed happen, absolutely. And they did look at low-fat diets, and this might be the one where it's like, okay, this might be what I want to check out. There may have a small decrease in testosterone with low-fat, and the reason was, maybe it makes intuitive sense saying, hey, we need fats to create hormones, so we have to have some sort of minimum value. But it's not super solid data, and it's kind of mixed, and it's also small sample size. And so like overall, like hedging our bets, if you're like, I need to optimize my diet for testosterone, Jordan, that's my number one priority. Then I say, okay, let's just make sure we're getting a adequate amount of healthy fats in. Like I said, you'll see people online who say you need to eat animal fats, you need to eat X, Y, and Z, and this much of it. And at the end of the day, like I don't think there's any data saying you have to eat this many. I do think it does show eating saturated fat specifically might have a little bit of increase in testosterone as well. But like I said, we've talked about saturated fats ad nauseum in our cardiovascular lectures. That's kind of like this trade-off here. So you can get healthy fats as well. I don't think it necessarily has to be 100% saturated fats. Like I would not recommend that actually. So getting healthy fats as well, but making sure it's at an adequate intake level, anywhere from like 20-ish% and above would probably be decent. The low fat diet is usually defined like less than 10%. So going above that was probably reasonable. So I think it's reasonable to kind of say, hey, let's get an adequate fat intake, should be fine. And overall, we're going to wrap this up now. Thanks so much for watching all the way to the end. I really appreciate it. If you sign up for my mailing list, that'd be awesome. You'll get notified anytime I post a new video, podcast, or article. I said I won't spam you. I promise you. I hate spam. But thank you so much for following. I really appreciate it. Now get off the phone, get outside, and have a great rest of your day.